This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from across the continent and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the markets here for you, though. It's not looking good. Not my words, those are the words of the South African Finance Minister, ahead of the next ratings review for the country by Moody's. Now, if the country is put on a negative outlook tomorrow, that essentially gives it a 12 to 18-month window before a downgrade comes down the door. In Kenya, bank stocks have been on a strong streak of gains. KCB, largest bank by assets in the country, up 8% today. So far, its gains for the year, over 38%. Here's what's coming up tonight. All right then, let's start with Ghana over in West Africa. The country's Vision 2020 deadline for its economic blueprint is fast approaching, and it seems some sectors are lagging behind from reaching the goals set out back in 1995. In the document, the country outlines plans to accelerate economic growth, improve the quality of life by reducing poverty through private investment, among other goals. Tonight, we'll be taking a look at how far Ghana has come as we draw closer and closer to the year 2020. Let's examine this in a bit more detail. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai joins us now live from Ghana's capital of Accra. So, Nabil, let's go back to 1995. The then president of the country, Jerry Rawlings, laid out this very detailed list of the things the country wants to have achieved by 2020. That point is barely 3 months away. How many of those goals were met?
Well, Rama, we should say that the Ghana Vision 2020 was premised on 5 key thematic areas. That's human development, economic growth, rural development, urban development, as well as enabling environment. Now, to a very large extent, we can say that these 5 thematic areas has been achieved because when you look at human development, the target was to really improve the health needs of people, of all the citizens, and also to eliminate extreme poverty in the country. Now we are in 2019, and from 1995 till now, we've seen the implementation of a lot of policies and interventions being made targeting reduction of poverty and also improving the well-being of people. We can talk about the National Health Insurance Scheme, which was introduced sometime in 2000, where we can see that people can go to the hospital and access quality health care free of charge without paying any medical bills. Also, when you talk about eliminating extreme poverty, we can also say that there was an introduction of the Livelihood Empowerment Program Against Poverty, which people in the rural areas who are really poor are being given some stipends every 2 months just to support themselves. So with this, we can see that there's been some significant achievements. Now, on economic growth, the target was to really get GDP growth of 7% and also reduce inflation to 8%. What we have now in 2019, according to the World Bank, in the first quarter of 2019, we've seen GDP growth of 6.7%, which is quite close to the 7% target. Also, we've seen inflation hit 9.1% in June this year. So looking at these figures, we should say that there's been some quite significant improvement in terms of hitting this target of Vision 2020. And lastly, when we look at the enabling environment, we can see that there's a lot of public participation in our economy, which wasn't the case in 1995 when this vision was actually mooted, Rama.
Right. So back in 1995, one of the goals of the 2020 blueprint was to change the composition of Ghana's economy so that agriculture share of GDP was going to fall under 20% of GDP, and that of industry was going to rise up to at least 37%, hopefully moving on to 40%. The agriculture goal was hit not too long ago, but the industry goal is yet to be met. What is holding back manufacturing in Ghana?
Well, the manufacturing sector in Ghana is really problematic because over the years we've seen a lot of manufacturing companies go down. Those that were in the system during the Nkrumah era, we have the shoe factory, we have the tomato factory, all collapsing. And this is something that governments have really struggled to revive. And because it's capital intensive, a lot of the private sector are not able to really go into that. But then this current administration is really looking at going into the manufacturing sector, and it has one of its policies, which is one district, one factory, all geared towards reviving the manufacturing sector here in Ghana. What this policy seeks to do is to bring manufacturing companies in all 216 districts across the country. Now, this is one of the biggest campaign promises of these NPP governments, and we are going to 2020. A lot is yet to be seen as to the implementation of this ambitious target, but then there is a roadmap as to how the manufacturing sector here in Ghana is looking at being improved in the country.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai there live in Accra. Now, on to another economy that's growing at relatively high rates, Tanzania. Its National Statistics Bureau says that GDP growth was 7.2% in the second quarter. That increase, it says, was driven by construction, mining and communications. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with the numbers.
In the midst of an infrastructure boom, Tanzania's economy is growing steadily. The country's industrial policy has driven growth in the first half of the year, and analysts say local production of construction materials has played a big role.
You know, near hydropower construction, a massive project, and that's really well underway, and a lot of the activity has been in this part of the year. That's why we're seeing that filter through into the numbers. The standard gauge railway, which is ongoing, the various road and highway bridges, construction, flyovers, so that's all something that's feeding into these numbers.
The telecommunications sector is also surging. Telecoms companies say Tanzanians are spending more time on mobile phones, and broadcasting and internet services are expanding. Another area of growth is the country's mining sector. Reforms in mining laws and stronger government oversight led to higher production of gold, coal and diamonds. Experts say the main issue now for Tanzania is converting the growth and success seen in the construction and mining sectors into wider areas like trade, logistics and manufacturing. This is how more low-income Tanzanians will feel the direct impact of this growth. Experts say despite the growth, job creation efforts are still needed to address the high poverty and youth unemployment. Mohammed has been selling fruits at Mwenge for over 10 years. He says he's yet to feel the benefits.
We just get money to eat, money for basic needs. We don't have enough to save, just to survive.
In the second half of this year, crop production also increased. The sector grew 10% compared to the same period last year. Cash crops like cashew nuts and cotton are being closely managed by the government in a move to increase agriculture's contribution to the GDP.
The biggest private sector in Tanzania is the farmer. So all the smallholder farmers together are way more than the number of bankers and telcos and whatever. So the government is really trying to also see how they can look out for them.
The government is optimistic about the trend in economic growth. But as the improvements remain concentrated in certain sectors, many Tanzanians have yet to feel the impact. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Also in the world, the South African Vice President is on an official visit to China. Early on Thursday, David Mabuza met his Chinese counterpart Wang Qishan in Beijing. Here's that report.
A welcoming ceremony for David Mabuza. Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan greeted his South African counterpart at Beijing's Great Hall of the People Thursday. After reviewing guards of honor from China's People's Liberation Army, they co-chaired the 7th plenary session of the China-South Africa Binational Commission.
The plenary session will not only enhance our bilateral ties and cooperation, but also exemplify to the world that two large nations are upholding multilateralism, fairness, and justice.
Wang says the world is at a time of uncertainty and instability, especially with the rise of unilateralism and protectionism. Both China and South Africa are major developing countries and representatives of emerging market countries. Therefore, the development of Sino-South African relations has a growing impact on the international stage.
Both our countries have unique strength and are of big influence in respect of promoting peace and stability in our respective regions. South Africa believes that peace remains the core eminence.
The China-South Africa Binational Commission was established in 2000 to serve as a platform to address core issues such as trade promotion and economic exchange. China is South Africa's largest trading partner, and South Africa is China's largest trading partner in Africa. Bilateral trade volumes have increased more than 20-fold since the two established the diplomatic ties 21 years ago. South Africa is one of the continent's leading economies, and China is the largest developing country in the world. The two have forged a comprehensive strategic partnership that's operating at bilateral, multilateral, and continental levels. And Mabuza's visit is expected to further cement the bilateral relations. Cao Huiyao, CGTN, Beijing.
Quick run through some company news. Starting in telecommunications, MTN has ditched a plan to sell its 53% stake in Mascom Wireless, Botswana. The firm says that the deal, which is supposed to net it about $300 million, was axed because certain conditions related to the transaction had not been met. But the telecoms company says its $1 billion divestment plan is still making steady progress. It is in advanced discussions, it says, around the disposal of a 49% holdings in ATC Ghana and ATC Uganda. Steinhoff International is considering the sale of about a quarter of Pepco Group through an IPO that could value the European retailer at over $4.4 billion. That listing could take place in the first half of next year. The sale of these shares in Pepco would be the latest in a string of asset sales for Steinhoff. The firm narrowly avoided collapsing in the wake of a brutal accounting crisis in late 2017. It has negotiated a debt restructuring plan with lenders earlier this year. General Electric shares have surged after the manufacturer raised its 2019 cash flow forecast for the second straight quarter, giving its turnaround efforts a much-needed boost. The company says its industrial businesses will generate as much as $2 billion in free cash in 2019 compared to a previously forecast $1 billion. And finally, the US tech firm Apple says it is expecting sales for the crucial holiday shopping quarter that beat Wall Street expectations. The company CEO Tim Cook revealed that the new iPhone 11 models were off to a pretty good start, as sales of the AirPods, Apple Watches and streaming services do continue to rise. Apple expects a midpoint of $87.5 billion in sales for its fiscal first quarter, which comes to close in December, above analyst expectations of $86.9 billion. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Nigeria is proposing much tighter rules for social media platforms. We'll explore why. And how exactly has the business climate in Egypt improved over the last year? The numbers, the details and the charts coming up shortly.
An open platform to a market of close to 1.4 billion people. A new platform strengthening global economic cooperation. A progressive platform promoting innovative growth and inclusive development. Join CGTN and its integrated media teams as we take you to the second China International Import Expo in Shanghai. We'll show you how the expo reflects a new era of China's opening up, how it builds a shared future of global economic prosperity, and what this means for consumers, businesses, and policymakers. Only on CGTN.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to the continent's country with the biggest population, Nigeria. The government over there says it's working on how to, in its words, inject sanity into the social media space, which it believes is completely out of control. The country's information minister claims that social media today constitutes a real danger to the unity of Nigerians. The proposed idea, though, has created a lot of backlash. Activists say that this law, if it ever does come to that, unfairly targets criticisms that the government simply does not like. This, however, is not the first time that legislators in Nigeria have tried to crack down on social media. Back in 2016, during the first tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari, an effort to regulate social media sites was rejected. At the time, Nigerians argued that the platforms aided Buhari's election the previous year. All right, then, so what's cooking in Nigeria? Let's find out. Phil Haza is live in Abuja right now with more data on this particular story. So, Phil, the information minister says that regulation of social media platforms, in his view, is necessary. But the vice president says he doesn't think government regulation is the way to go. Which of these two positions should we believe?
Well, Rama, thank you. But you see, the mere fact that two top government officials, that's the minister and the number 2 citizen of the country, sort of have a clash of interest on this issue, actually suggests that the issue of regulating social media might not see the light of day. I mean, you have over 120 million Nigerians online, according to the latest Nigerian Communications and Commission report. You have millions of young people active in social media. They found a way to express themselves better, also attract more economic value to themselves. And so experts are saying that this may not be the best way to go about it. There's already several, legal ways to go about this. There's the libel and defamation laws that are in place, in existence. All the government might need to do is to strengthen the judiciary to ensure that those laws take action and also bring people to book when such related issues, maybe as related to hate speeches, are found.
Indeed. So when the information minister speaks about the need to, quote unquote, sanitize social media, what sort of tools does he have in mind? Is he trying to introduce new ones that do not exist on the statutes, or is he just going to try and use whatever he has available to him through the law?
Well, thank you, Rama. That's the same question that's been on the news since earlier this week. That statement was made by the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed. Everyone is asking how exactly will hate speeches be determined, at what level, what degree of hate speeches, how do you determine the penalties, several levels of penalties that will be meted out to would be defaulters if that law is passed. And so, but however, the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, has stated that a committee will be set up to come up with a structure, come up with possible means on how, this hate speech or fake news penalties or law will pan out. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed until then.
Indeed. One last question for you. This is not the first time that Nigerian legislators have been on this topic. Back in 2016, there was another effort to try and introduce legislation to essentially regulate social media content. What is it about Nigeria specifically that keeps bringing legislators and the government back to this topic year after year after year?
Thank you, Rama. That question is actually the fact that actually you've had this same issue repeated, and from the 8th Assembly to the 9th Assembly also suggests that this is not an issue of the legislative arm of government, but more likely to be coming from the executive arm of government. That also explains why recent statements by several government officials have been directed towards the fact that many Nigerians, many people on social media trying to divide the nation, trying to destabilize destabilize the government or literally set the country on fire. And but you know, like I said, several social media activists and experts have said that what the government should be looking at this point is to see how they can work with institutions like the religious institutions, you know, social media, you know, groups and civic society groups to see how they can work closely with the people and sensitize people on how they can interact better on social media, moral values, core moral values, also on interacting on social media to avoid things that may be perceived as hate speeches or incite violence in the country.
Indeed. We'll see how this all plays out. Philly Hazza live in Abuja. Thank you very much. Now then, let's move on from matters of social media in Nigeria. Lagos is not just Nigeria's commercial capital, it's also the country's most populous city. In fact, in some circles, it's described as one of the megacities on the planet. It's estimated that nearly 6,000 people come into this commercial hub on the Atlantic every day with no plans to leave. CGTN's Deji Badmus now explores how this megacity dream is slowly turning into a nightmare for many in Lagos.
With a population of over 21 million people, Lagos is Africa's most populous city. It's also a very densely populated city, with a density of around 6,871 residents per square kilometer. And by 2050, the city's population is projected to double, which will make it the third largest city in the world. But it would seriously lag behind in terms of infrastructure compared to other large cities of the world. Even at the moment, the city's infrastructure is overburdened by its large population.
Now, every Lagosian would tell you that the biggest headache they confront on a daily basis is commuting around the city. Whether it's going to work or returning, keeping appointments or running errands. It could be a nightmare. Traffic jam is something you never can avoid. And it's one of the reasons why your best bet of commuting around the city is using these guys.
So I do a morning show that starts at 6 a.m. That means I need to leave the house at 4:30 a.m. to get to the office at about 6 a.m. So that's my daily life, every day of my life for the past 7 years. So it's pretty hectic and it could be pretty challenging on your health and family. It's very tough.
The government of the city estimates that at least 1.6 million vehicles ply Lagos roads every day. Of that figure, it estimates that 226 cars run on the city's roads per kilometer. The national average is 16 cars per kilometer. That clearly explains the city's notorious traffic jam, and it's the residents who are bearing the brunt.
It's a major problem because whether we like it or not, I mean, since there's no rail, I mean, you have to go by road. So, except the rail option is, is adopted, which I think is a major capital-intensive thing, which will take years to actualize. We have no choice than to, cope with whatever is happening in Lagos with the attendant inconveniences.
The government of the city is actually building a light rail to ease its transportation challenge. But the project has almost grounded to a halt for lack of funds. By the time it's completed, the dynamics of the population may have changed.
But we can plan for population growth. Data would show us how many people we would have, how many children are being born every year. But we don't take a look at data. If we don't work with data, you can't build cities. For traffic especially, you need to look at where people work. Why do people move far distances to work? Do we need to bring workplaces closer to where people are, or build more affordable houses? For instance, build more affordable housing on the island where most people work, come from the mainland to the island. So if you build affordable housing there, they don't have to travel long distances. If some offices are on the mainland or you work remotely, it's also very easier.
Working and living in Lagos could be quite interesting, but it could also be quite annoying and frustrating as well. Those who have gotten used to the city somehow fall in love with it and devise their means of dealing with the troubles it throws at them. But if authorities do not do more than they're doing at the moment to match the infrastructure with the population growth, the city may sooner than later buckle under the weight of its own population. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now then, regulatory reforms in Nigeria have propelled that sub-Saharan African economy to be among the most improved in the latest World Bank rankings for ease of doing business. That report measures the cost to firms of business regulations across 190 countries. In our continuing series, we'll be looking at the rankings of several states across sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. Today, we'll be looking at Egypt. It jumped 6 places in this year's report. Here's Yasir Kim exploring why.
The World Bank report has reflected an improvement in the ease of doing business in Egypt. Some of these improvements can be attributed to better infrastructure.
The 4 aspects that saw a better performance are the ease of establishing business, better access to electricity all year round, the tax collection system, and protecting minority shareholders. As for the finance sector, banks have eased the facilities and conditions to offer loans for foreign investors.
One of the main challenges facing businessmen in Egypt is red tape and bureaucracy. Adel Nasser, an Egyptian businessman, says he faced such issues before, but he confirmed that investors have been working with the government lately to remove these hurdles.
The latest amendments in the investment law have been based on our chamber's suggestions and talks with the government. One of the issues we pushed for was to allow investors to transfer their profits abroad and in dollars too. It was prohibited before. Another obstacle we worked on is to reduce the time needed to release imported raw materials from the ports. It used to take ages and incurs huge costs on investors. Now it has become faster and easier to receive your raw material for production.
Experts say there were promising developments in the last couple of months. First is the drop in interest rates by the central bank and further cuts expected before the end of the year. This will facilitate loans for businesses to be established or to expand. Secondly are the new free zones where factories can be built free from red tape with attractive tax-free incentives.
The government has allocated pieces of land in most cities free of charge for industrial projects. This was done to encourage businesses to establish factories, begin production, and employ skilled workers. Incentives are given for investments, especially in Upper Egypt, that has a lot of potential.
These steps could encourage more investors to put up shop in Egypt. However, in spite of the improvements, Egypt is still ranked 114 out of 190 countries. It has to climb up that ladder if it wants to attract more investments in the near future. And to do so, some experts believe Cairo has to work harder on easing regulations for businesses.
There are several regulations that need attention, like registering loyalty rights, fighting corruption, as well as new bankruptcy laws. Another issue is the speed in executing court decisions and protecting contracts. This has to be addressed to increase foreign investments in the country.
Egypt says it targets to attract $10 billion of investments in 2020, up from the current $7 billion. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, we often cover stories about scarcity in this program, but this next story is actually about the complete opposite. Last year, Kenyan farmers spent nearly 60% more on milk and other dairy products compared to their colleagues in East Africa. But as many Kenyan households continue to spend more heavily on this much in-demand commodity, on the ground the picture is quite different. In the upper eastern region of Kenya, for instance, there's so much camel milk that farmers are actually struggling to find a market for it. Yes, GTN's Penina Karibe with this report.
Moyale, a small town in Kenya's northern county of Marsabit and nestled on the border with Ethiopia. This is some 774 kilometers from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. It is a cosmopolitan town and attracts people from all over the country due to its brisk business. But there is a unique feature here, camels, mostly because of the terrain and harsh weather conditions. Similarly, majority of the people here are pastoralists, and they are milking quite literally from camel farming.
The camel in Moyale is the Somali breed, which produces a lot of milk. Some, during the rain season, the one camel can produce up to 10 liters a day.
We have a lot of milk in Moyale. Some of it we pour because we have no place to take it. That's why we thought of finding a way of benefiting economically from the milk.
And that's how the idea of what is now known as the Moyale Camel Milk Dairy Cooperative Society was born. The camel owners were traditionally men, and the milk handlers, who are women, formed groups to find a way of marketing their milk. Initially, the groups were 6, comprising different tribes in the area. Eventually, the county government merged them into one group.
Getting a building to operate is a challenge. We cannot afford to buy land. It's too expensive.
25 million.
In these alleyways of Moyale town, jerrycans initially used to sell cooking oil are lined up on the ground. Only this time, they're not loaded with cooking oil, but with camel milk. It is morning hours and business is booming. More jerrycans arrive, ferried by motorcyclists. They are fresh from the farms and are delivered to the women, who immediately empty the milk into plastic buckets, from where they then sell to their customers. 3 such cups make a litre, which retails at 90 Kenyan shillings, or just slightly under $1. Well, taste-wise, quite frankly, there isn't much of a difference between this and cow milk, but camel milk here is quite a hit to the locals.
Camel milk is medicinal. It provides relief from very many illnesses. The unboiled one is especially really good for diabetes.
While popular, trade in camel milk is still in its early stages here, and conditions of hygiene are far from well developed.
Sometimes, passers-by knock down the milk. Also, we use firewood to boil, which emits smoke, and other people around us complain a lot.
We realize that the only way we can empower these women is to bring them together, to use cooperative economic model, whereby they'll be able to address we'll give them the capacity to address the issue of hygiene, the capacity to be able to do a business to make milk product, camel milk as economic venture, not just a tradition.
The county government has since partnered with a local non-governmental organization to put up a milk cooling plant. From here, the group can collect all the milk from the camel owners, cool it, pasteurize, and sell it not only to other parts of the county, but even as far as Nairobi, where camel milk is increasingly gaining demand. The group projects a sale of 10,000 litres per day at a price of $1 per litre. In a month, projected sales will gross $300,000.
It's a very big economic enterprise, very big. It will be able to reduce poverty. It will be able to create job creation. It will be bring women empowerment.
The area has over 28,000 camels, of which 21,000 are females. That puts it squarely as one of Kenya's high dairy producing regions. With the plant expected to start operations in November, economic fortunes of Marsabit County can only head up. Penina Karibe, CGTN, in Moyale, Kenya.
We're just past 18:30 GMT, time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. So what's next for the United Kingdom as it prepares for an early election in December? Thailand's fishing industry hits back at the US for ending duty-free status on many of its products. All that and more is coming up shortly.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the programme. Brexit, one of the big stories essentially all the way through the fourth quarter of the year. Campaigning has kicked off in the United Kingdom ahead of a highly unpredictable December poll. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn are currently pitching their very different visions of Brexit after the UK's departure from the EU was pushed back to the end of January 2020. Now, the vote will be the UK's first December general election since 1923. It's a sign of the enormous uncertainty that has gripped this nation ever since it voted to leave the European Union in the middle of 2016. All right, then, so let's dig into this story in a bit more detail. Alana Petrov joins us now live from London with the latest on Brexit. So, Alana, walk us through the rationale politicians had for deciding to hold a general election in the middle of December instead of focusing all their energy on getting the UK out of the EU with a sensible deal before the end of the year.
Today was supposed to be the day that Prime Minister Boris Johnson got his Brexit deal done. October 31st was the Brexit deadline when the United Kingdom was supposed to split apart from the European Union. Instead, as you said, Mr. Johnson called an election. He found that he couldn't get the support he needed in Parliament to push his Brexit deal through. There was a deadlock in Parliament, and his Conservative Party couldn't get enough votes to get everything done in time. And so he argues that this election is the best way to ensure Brexit does in fact get done, even though it will be delayed. He's thinking that if his Conservative Party does well and gets enough politicians into Parliament, then he can have the Brexit he's been dreaming of. However, it's a risky move. There are many opposition parties that are trying to grab votes, and it can be difficult to convince people to support an election campaign at a time when people here in the UK would rather be focused on preparing for the holiday season. The new election date on December 12th is just 2 weeks before that all-important Christmas holiday season. It is massive here in the UK. During this time, it can also be difficult to convince supporters to go outside, knock on people's doors and ask for votes because it's cold outside. As you said, we haven't had a December election since the 1920s here in the UK. Experts are saying the timing of this election and the Brexit issue makes it very difficult to predict how everything will unfold.
Indeed. So ultimately, though, this election does act as a sort of referendum, if you will, on Brexit and how it's been handled by the UK's political class. So assuming that's the main issue that voters might base their decisions on, does that swing votes decisively in favour of any specific party?
Well, this will absolutely affect voter preferences. The latest poll shows that Boris Johnson's party is in the lead, but we know that polls have been wrong in the past here in the UK, and the competition is fierce. There's the main opposition party, the Labour Party, which is led by Jeremy Corbyn. You mentioned him just earlier. He's just launched his election campaign today. He's saying the economic and financial system in this country is rigged to benefit the elite. He says he's going to fix things, and he's promising another referendum on Brexit. Now, Labour has been a popular party in the past, but many people now worry in the business community about Corbyn's radical ideas and the way he's going to run the economy. Some are arguing that his leadership has hurt the party. Then, so we've got the Conservatives, we've got the Labour, then we've got the Liberal Democrats who are saying they want to cancel Brexit altogether. They're a smaller force in politics in the UK, but their plan may appeal to the nearly half of the UK population who voted against Brexit back in 2016. Another party, the Brexit Party, they support a clean break from the European Union. Now, this clean break, many people in the business community are warning that this is dangerous for the country to break away without a deal from its biggest trading partner. Then there's so many political parties here. Then there's also the Scottish National Party, which has a lot of support in Scotland, and they're hoping to have their own referendum to break away from the UK and remain in the European Union. One voter that I spoke to this week, he said that even though he lives in England, he wishes he could actually vote for the Scottish National Party because he thinks they do a better job of countering Brexit. If you're a voter here in the UK, lots of political parties, lots of options, plenty to think about in the lead up to this general election.
Indeed, in a blistering array of permutations there at the ballot box. One last question for you. Sterling did rise on reports that the Brexit Party apparently isn't going to field candidates. In some constituencies, apparently the idea here is not to essentially split the vote with the Conservatives. How are markets processing the data we're getting around this election?
So markets hate uncertainty, but that's what we're getting right now. That uncertainty makes it difficult to make decisions about where investors put their money. But if we look at the UK pound in particular, it's now shot up to trade around $1.29. That is a huge jump over the past month. In fact, the currency is on track for its biggest monthly gain in more than 10 years. Last month, it was trading around $1.20. A big reason for this increase in the pound is investor confidence that the UK will not crash out of the European Union without a finalized deal. That's considered the biggest risk for the currency and the biggest risk for the country. But based on how things are going, it looks like that risk has been taken off the table, at least for now. So everyone is watching the pound to track investor sentiment to see how investors and traders think Brexit will go and think this election will go.
Indeed, it's certainly going to be a very interesting election. Alana Petrov in London, thank you very much. Now, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg has testified for the first time since the two deadly crashes involving the company's 737 MAX aircraft. At the hearing, Dennis Muilenburg apologized to the families of the victims who died in the two crashes, one in Indonesia, one in Ethiopia. But as our correspondent Giles Gibson now reports, his apology did very little, if anything, to pacify lawmakers.
These are just some of the 346 victims of the 737 MAX crashes. Their photos carried into the US Congress by grieving relatives. Lawmakers have pledged they'll get to the bottom of what happened. And the CEO of the company who built the doomed planes has apologized repeatedly to the victims' families this week.
We are deeply, deeply sorry. And we'll never forget. And I want you to know that. And we're committed to making the improvements that we need to make.
But for Paul Njoroge, who lost his wife, 3 young children and mother-in-law in the Ethiopian Airlines crash, it's too little, too late.
8 months have passed since the crash, and it's easy to say that now because there has been a lot of pressure on Boeing from the public, from the media, from the families of the victims, from the US lawmakers. So it's easy for him to say that he regrets that.
Muilenburg also faced US senators on Tuesday, with one lawmaker accusing Boeing of selling, quotes, flying coffins.
These hearings come after internal messages between Boeing pilots in 2016 surfaced earlier this month. The company's chief test pilot expressed concern about the software system known as MCAS, saying it was, quotes, running rampant in flight simulations.
The anti-stall system was criticised by Indonesian authorities last week in their report on the 2018 Lion Air crash that left 189 people dead. Despite the mounting controversy, Boeing wants US authorities to approve the 737 MAX's return to the skies by the end of the year. But some family members of the victims say the planes should never fly again. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
Another day and another trade dispute, this time between Thailand and the United States. The country's fishing industry has hit back at a US move that ended duty-free status on many of its products. The Thai government says it's currently looking for talks with the US on its decision, which some claim is the start of another trade dispute. With more on this, here's Martin Lowe.
Dock workers unload the daily catch at a fishing port in Thailand. Much of the fish is exported to the US, where Thai seafood has benefited from zero duty. But now it's one of 573 products to lose preferential status from April 2020. The move will add costs of at least $1.3 billion US dollars. Some say far more. The US says it's taking the step because Thailand has a poor record on migrant workers' rights, particularly in the fishing industry. It wants migrants to be able to form trade unions. But a senior Thai fisheries official says the action is completely unjustified.
No country in the world allows migrants to form union because they're temporary workers. I can say there's no difference between conditions for Thai workers and migrant workers. The U.S. demands are unfair to Thailand.
The timing of the decision is being questioned, as it comes just a year after the U.S. upgraded Thailand in its annual Trafficking in Persons report for tackling worker abuses, while the European Union also lifted a threatened ban on Thai seafood because of efforts to better regulate the industry. Many believe this is more about protecting U.S. commercial interests. The US has an almost $20 billion trade deficit with Thailand, something President Donald Trump has said he wants to change. The move also follows shortly after Bangkok banned the use of a number of pesticides, which could affect US farm exports to Thailand. The Thai government is playing down the impact of the US decision, but it comes at a time when Thai exports are already struggling because of the US-China trade war and a record high for the Thai currency, which is pushing up the prices of its products overseas. Martin Low, CGTN, Samut Sakon Fishing Port, Thailand.
Let's shift focus to the world of tech now. China has officially started commercial use of 5G networks. On Thursday, major domestic operators in the world's second largest economy rolled out the latest service packages, marking a key step in Beijing's ambitions to become a tech superpower. Take a look.
It hasn't been even 4 months since China began issuing 5G licenses for commercial use, and China Unicom, China Mobile, and China Telecom have revealed their monthly plans for 5G users. The cheapest package includes 30 gigabytes of web data, 200 to 500 minutes of calling time, and is priced around 130 yuan, which is about the median price for current 4G monthly plans. The most expensive package is 600 yuan a month. It buys 300 gigabytes of data and 3,000 calling minutes. Prices can also vary in terms of velocity. The three operators are offering velocity choices of 300 and 500 megabytes per second, as well as 1 gigabyte per second. All are faster than existing 4G network. Operators say the plans may sound pricey at first, but actually save money for users.
We charge by gigabytes instead of megabytes in the 5G era. 1 gigabyte equals to 1024 megabytes. So it turns out that users now pay only 3 yuan for 1 gigabyte every month. That actually makes 5G plans much more cost efficient.
5G commercial use is available in 50 major cities for now, but the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology said it would put 130,000 5G-based stations into use by the end of the year so that major towns will get access soon enough.
China Mobile runs more than 40,000 5G-based stations now. We will cover most Chinese towns by the end of next year.
People with 5G phones can start buying 5G plans on Friday, and they can keep their old phone numbers while switching services. Xiacheng, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through some commodity prices here for you. A focus on crude oil, still hovering around the $60 mark for Brent crude. Nigeria's presidency announced a few hours ago an agreement with Saudi Aramco and the country's public investment funds to set up a partnership, apparently, with the state-run oil company, the state-owned, rather, oil company in Nigeria, NNPC, to revive Nigeria's refineries. Exactly how they're going to do it, though, that's not 100% clear. As things stand, NNPC needs to identify what parts of its infrastructure, there's a lot of it, pipelines, depots, refineries, dead refineries, you name it. They need to identify which part of it needs foreign investment to get them back into shape. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to a Ugandan entrepreneur who's catching in on demand for poultry. And we'll show you how some Kenyans are turning water hyacinth, this notorious weed, into a source of biofuel.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Now, from an initial flock, if you will, of about 1,000 to 10,000 birds, that is the story of one Ugandan entrepreneur who's cashing in on poultry farming. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga caught up with Saddam Sebagala at his farm in central Uganda and filed this report for Grassroots tonight.
Taking stock of his business, 27-year-old Saddam Sebagala rears chickens for meat. He was inspired by his father.
When I was done with university, I tried to look for jobs here and there. Things were hard, so when I tried to talk to him, he was like, you come and maybe you help me out with the farm, managing it. All of a sudden, I also started liking it. And that's how I got the love for poultry farming.
He began his own business in 2015 with a loan of $1,000 from his father.
I started with 1,000, then I gave him his money, the initial capital. I came on adding the number. Right now I'm doing 10,000 birds per batch.
He supplies hotels and supermarkets. For 4 years now, Saddam has been rearing chicken. He says the business is not labor intensive and it is profitable. He's now encouraging young people to take up the business.
I have gained knowledge in rearing chicken, but I'm also able to engage in other farming practices.
But like any other business, this one also has limitations.
The price for the maize has doubled. That's also a very big challenge because in this feed we use, maize takes like 50%. That means now the profit I was looking at has gone down maybe by a quarter.
Figures from Uganda's Bureau of Statistics show that 70% of Ugandans are employed in agriculture. But many young people look elsewhere for employment opportunities. Saddam believes as the demand for food in the region goes up, more young people could take up farming as a livelihood. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
One last story for you. Roughly 3 out of 4 families in Kenya depend on wood or charcoal to cook their daily meals. However, using these biofuels are known to increase indoor pollution, and that comes with a whole host of health problems down the line. CGTN's Wilkis Sanyaba now explores how Kenya's Lake Victoria region is turning what was once dubbed as the world's worst aquatic weed into a source of biofuel.
The crisp, fresh fish fried to perfection is one of the attractions of Dunga Beach in Kisumu County. But lately, the food stalls are not the only structures on these shores. These little stalls covered in plastic are changing the way the fisher folk at the beach work. This is a biodigester. It works like a stomach. Organic waste goes in one end, ferments and gives off gas and liquid fertilizer which comes out of the other end. The women use the biogas produced to cook their fish. This is a brainchild of Dominic Wanji here.
So we came here and I noticed the women over here cooking on firewood. And I was like, that cannot be healthy every single day, and it's smoky like crazy.
Dominic also noticed that the water hyacinth plant was spreading further, making it harder for fishermen to access the lake. So he came up with an idea to solve both problems. He installed 2 massive biodigesters at the beach. He uses water hyacinth and other organic waste from around the lake.
So they started giving us the offals, and then the restaurants, we told them, give us your garbage as well. And so all of the organic waste that the beach generates ends up in the biogas digesters.
The digesters turn this into about 25,000 liters of gas daily. The women then pay 50 US cents per hour to cook their fish on the biogas stoves. It's cheaper than the firewood they are accustomed to.
Firewood is so hard to use, and we have to get it from far. We have to pay to buy it and then to transport it, so it isn't cheap.
Using solid fuels like this for cooking also increases indoor pollution.
The World Health Organization estimates that about 14,000 Kenyans lose their lives annually owing to indoor air pollution, a problem that this biogas project hopes to resolve, but it isn't the only problem that it is looking to address.
The Kisumu County government is now considering installing the digesters to help the city get rid of organic waste.
About 63% of the waste that we have is organic, and this organic can be put in better use through adopting sustainable technologies to harness it into energy instead of just having it wasted outside there.
And there are 50 more biodigesters in homesteads around the beach. These efforts may seem like a drop in a massive lake, but they are bolstering efforts to ensure there's no waste, as it is all reduced, reused or recycled. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies before we wrap up the program. So inflation data did come out in Kenya a few hours ago. After falling to levels not seen in 15 months, CPI actually rebounded in the month of October. Headline inflation, 4.95%, driven mostly by a rise in food prices. On an annual basis, Kenyans are paying 47% more for the staple maize grain than they were a year ago, and 32% more for maize flour as well. It's really, really painful on the bottom end of the income ladder. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There's several ways to get your thoughts back to us. All of them are on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.